Today, we are talking about the Age of Apocalypse. Yes, we just got a brand new big box expansion for Marvel Champions. So in this video, we're going to talk about the encounters, a brief review of the heroes, some of the modular sets, and the campaign itself. So let's just jump right in and start talking about the villains. We're going to discuss these in the order of what I like. So starting out with my least favorite encounter in the box, and then we're going to move into my favorite encounter in the box 5 discussions later. So starting with my least favorite encounter, which is crazy because I really do like this encounter. That's Unus. This encounter revolves around the infinite modular set, and the core of this experience is the permanent side scheme gene pool. So it starts with 4 threat. If you're playing in the campaign, it actually starts with a little bit more. And every single time an ally is defeated by anything other than consequential damage, we have to add 3 threat to this side scheme. Now, on its own, letting threat pile up here is not actually that bad, but that's why I like Unus. So Unus grows in power based on how much threat is on the gene pool side scheme. This dynamic shifting of powers is pretty cool. He's not the most challenging villain we've ever seen, but he's also the first villain in the box, so he's not really supposed to be. But what I really like about Unus here is how he stresses heroes. He probably will be in my rotation of villains to start testing heroes out against because he kind of brings it all. He brings Retaliate with gene pool, which messes with all of my ally build, Stalwart, so you can't just stun lock him and also ignore gene pool, because once you get 6 threat on gene pool, he gets Stalwart. He has a pretty decent amount of threat to take care of because you have that permanent side scheme. You're adding threat to that scheme every single round, and then there's a good number of side schemes in his deck, so it's not a little bit of threat to take care of. He's also got some nasty minions in that deck and a lot of HP. Unus is a great villain to test a deck out against, and I'm happy that we have him. So even though he's my least favorite in the box, I still really like Unus. Next up, we're going to be talking about in Sabah Nur. Yeah, this is our first 3-sided villain and our second apocalypse encounter. He has a really cool mechanic where he's flipping between different forms. Think Angel or Ant-Man Wasp. He gets different keywords like Overkill, Retaliate, or Stalwart based on what form he's in, but also whenever he flips into a form, there's a forced response that we have to trigger. So for example, if he flips into Giant form, he heals damage, and then his passive ability is that he gets Stalwart. There are a lot of encounter cards in this set that make him flip either on reveal, or there's side schemes that change his form when you do defeat that side scheme, and you can't just leave it out because they've got amplifier, hazards, or just nasty icons on them. So this requires the heroes to think on their feet and adapt to what he's throwing at us in that situation. But if that wasn't enough, he does have a ticking time bomb to superpower cards. So similar to Zola, we're actually adding counters to the main scheme every single round, and after we get 4 counters, we're discarding cards from the encounter deck until we get a superpower card. And then every superpower card in his set deals with his form changing, so it's probably going to interact with his mechanics in some way. So there isn't going to be an easy way to lock him down and have him stop flipping on you, right? We could kind of prevent some of those counters when we were going with Magneto if we just stunned him and kind of locked him down. You cannot do that with this version of Apocalypse, and that can get pretty brutal. One thing I will say is I thought I would like this scenario more than I actually did. When I first saw this, I was thinking it'd be a super cool scenario, and the more I looked into it, I thought it could potentially be like a top 5 or top 10 scenario for me personally in terms of enjoyment. After playing it a few times, it is a lot of upkeep, which brings the experience down for me a little bit. Now that does go away with more time and familiarity with that villain, but I do think he's going to be similar to Venom Goblin for me, where he's really fun, he's challenging, but often just something that I don't pull out very frequently, just because it is a good bit of work to continuously flip. Venom Goblin, you're adding a ton of threat, moving that counter around, which is a really cool mechanic, but it is a lot of upkeep. I feel like I'm sounding like I didn't enjoy this scenario. I very much did. Next up, I think we have the hardest scenario in the box, with the four horsemen. Actually, let me know in the comments if you think they're the hardest. If you don't think they're the hardest, let me know who you do think is the hardest. But this is our multi-villain scenario, and let me tell you, it's pretty freaking cool. There are 4 villains that each hate us and will punish us in different and unique ways. All of them have a forced response that activate, assuming that they have at least 1 HP left after they attack. And these are not great. They're pretty rough. Like death deals a damage to every single character you control. It really punishes that ally strategy, and that's been kind of a theme throughout the box. We have a lot of encounters that are really going to punish you for throwing allies and trying to play that traditional strategy in Marvel Champions of the chump block strategy. We have Unus with the gene pool, we have, Death just taking out allies, and there's a couple other ways that the box punishes like an ally swarm build, which has historically been very, very strong in Champions. Famine discards the top 10 cards of your deck, which is going to get you closer and closer to decking out in that extra encounter card. But I also really like Famine if we're running like Digging Deep or White Fox. That's just kind of a little fun interaction, but probably not worth putting them in the deck specifically for this scenario unless you're already running them. War is probably my least favorite because I do love to build. He discards an upgrade or a support you control when he attacks. And then finally, Hulk's best friend and Deadpool's nightmare, Pestilence blanks your identity's text box until the next villain phase begins. The first time I played this, I actually tried to whittle each one of them down equally until I could wipe them all out, because they don't actually go away when you defeat them or when you bring their HP down to 0. They are still there, they will still activate, they can still be the active villain, they just don't trigger that forced response. And so I was, dealing 3 damage over here to Death and then poking 4 damage at Pestilence, trying to whittle them down so I could kind of wipe and win in a turn. But that's really not the way to go. What you want to do is you want to pick the worst enemy for your deck and just beat the pulp out of them. Then, because there are so many extra activations in this encounter deck, the fewer activations with them not being able to trigger their response, the better. Tagging along that brings stun to the table, since these nasty effects mostly, I should say, there are treacheries that will trigger that forced response, even if they are at 0. But those nasty effects mostly trigger when they attack. Stun can really slow down their pacing and can be really, really effective in this scenario. This scenario feels like they are really teaming up. The 4 horsemen are bringing heat against you. It's tough. It's dynamic. Different decks will hate different villains and try and defeat different villains at a different rate, right? And so bringing a different deck and understanding what your strategy is for these 4 horsemen is really important, and every single deck is going to be different and you're going to want to target different ones. It's good. I'm here for it. Next up, we're going to be traveling through time to fight Dark Beast. Now, Dark Beast is beefy. In expert mode, he starts with a 3-2 because he gets his goggles and 18 hit points. And then in stage 3, he goes up to 22 hit points in stage 3. It's wild. He actually does have a lot of hit points. But what is really cool is his Force Interrupt. When he attacks you, you have to resolve the special ability on the setting environment. And these settings / mod sets are really why I like him so much. He comes with 3 different sets, and you'll see 2 of them each game, because you'll add the setting and shuffle the rest of that themed mod set into the encounter deck when you start the game, and then when you flip him to his next stage. So you're going to get to see 2 out of the 3 mod sets every single game. So you can travel to the Savage Lands, where the villain is going to get a Retaliate 1, and on a special you have to discard the top 3 cards of your deck. Genosha gives the villain Steady and adds threat to the main scheme whenever you trigger that special, typically when Dark Beast is attacking. And then the last is Blue Moon, which gives all the minions guard and deals damage when that special is activated. Similar to the Riders and Apocalypse 2, which we're going to call him now, this requires a decent bit of tactical play. So the way that you approach the scenario will depend on what mod set you're dealing with. And I really think that's super cool. Coming from like a Lord of the Rings game where you are teching against the scenario, it feels like we're starting to get a lot more of that in Champions, and I'm super excited for that. I do really enjoy these mod sets. I've enjoyed them using in different villains too, but the reason I really like Dark Beast is he forces more interaction with them via his Force Interrupt. And so bringing the mod sets, I do think that the mod sets are coloring my enjoyment of Dark Beast slightly, but I think I have determined that that's okay. Yeah, so the final villain in the box, well, no, actually the third villain in the box is actually the final villain we're talking about, and that's my favorite villain. That's Apocalypse 1. And oof, whew, I've heard it described as a fusion of Hela and Magneto, and if you've seen any of my other previous content, you know how happy that makes me. This Apocalypse has 4 stages of the villain, and depending on what difficulty, determines where he starts. So an expert, he's going to start in stage 3. This is special because this is a little bit different than the normal champion's progression encounter. You don't win by killing the villain and advancing to the next stage and then defeating that. Instead, whenever you defeat the villain, you're going to remove all the threat from the main, discard all attachments on him, then reset his health. The way that you actually defeat him is by going through a series of side quests similar to like Magneto until you defeat the third and open up your victory condition, which is then defeating Apocalypse. It's a really cool design. Each one of these side schemes are guarded by a powerful prelate minion, which blocks threat from being removed from the side scheme. So you can't just blitz thwarting that side scheme. You have to deal with these minions, which are super mean. And once you take them out, then you can thwart them down. So you really need to have a plan of when you're going to be pushing that side scheme, because a minion's coming out. And if you thwart down the side scheme, go immediately into the villain phase, you're going to have a bad time. Also, as we go up in side schemes, we get more acceleration tokens. We start with 1, and up to that third stage, we have 3 acceleration tokens on that side scheme. And so you can't just sit there and wait, because we're going to have pressure be put on you from that side scheme via acceleration tokens. That being said, I don't think that this is the hardest quest we've ever seen. It can be gamed a good bit, but dang, do I like it. So we talked a little bit about some of the modular sets when we talked about Dark Beast and Unus, but I did want to call out some of the more notable ones. The first one is Clan Akaba. So similar to the Infinites and Gene Pool, this has a permanent side scheme that changes how the game is interacted with. So cards from the mod set will add threat, and then if it ever reaches 10 threat, it starts with 5. You have to deal yourself an encounter card and you reduce the threat back down to 5. It's really not a problem until it is, and that can be pretty brutal. I really do like how this can interact with Master Plan from the Expert Encounter set. It can really screw up your plans, right? Because Master Plan is going to add 4 threat to it, and if you've just kind of been it'll be fine, and then all of a sudden you have 4 more threat that can deal an encounter card. Master Plan now has Surge. It can get pretty nasty pretty quickly, and I liked it more than I thought I would. The next mod set that we're going to talk about is Dystopian Nightmare. There's nothing too flashy about this one, but I do like it because I look at it as a step up from Bomb Scare, which is that first encounter set that we ever deal with in our champion's journey. It feels like it has a lot of interactions that the game offers. It'll force you to alter ego. It gives you stuns, it prevents threat from being removed via crisis and confuse. It just feels like it kind of shows off the game. And I think that this is going to be a good mod set to throw into a first game with someone to help show off the rules, or maybe that second game. It is not super easy. I like it. So I am viewing this as kind of like a change or an upgrade to Bomb Scare. And it's pretty nice. Like, it kind of will show off the entire game. And we have to talk about Standard 3. So Standard 3, I freaking love it. Honestly, like, I was thinking when I first saw this that maybe I would be doing 50-50, but I think that Standard 3 is just the way that I play now. It really does feel like your nemesis is drawing near and that doom is coming, because every single card in that encounter set is going to be adding pursuit counters to Pursued by the Past. And once you reach 4 pursuit counters, or 3 plus the number of players, 4 in a solo game, you have to go get your nemesis minion. And so you're seeing your nemesis on a much higher frequency, because a lot of these cards are going to be adding counters to that. So you get to see the nemesis, which is such a cool design area of the game that sometimes you just don't get to interact with for a long time unless you're D20 and you draw shadows every single game. So it really ramps up that interaction. It gives you safe trips down, because an advance could lose you the game, and it still can. The advanced version here is Dark Designs, but the way that it is worded, that you place a pursuit counter on Pursued by the Past, and then if there are pursuit counters, the villain schemes. So if you have 3 counters on Pursued by the Past, you can flip down, and if you draw Dr. Designs, now you're getting your Nemesis minion, and that's bad, but they're not going to scheme, and that's pretty awesome, honestly, for a solo player. Like, we have a set time where we can flip down and be okay. Mostly, there are some interactions that can really mess with that, but it's nice. But yeah, like I said, this has replaced my normal play mode. I honestly don't see myself much playing Standard 1, or God forbid Standard 2, much ever again. Let's talk about the overall campaign. So this is kind of that through line, how the scenarios are linked together, and you can play all the scenarios standalone, and that's how I normally play this game. That being said, I did want to talk about the campaign, and this is the part of the box that I did not actually enjoy that much. So the campaign mechanics are these missions. The missions are side schemes that cannot be interacted with. They're their own play area, and you have to play allies to the mission area, and then you can go on mission attempts. The way that you go on mission attempts is you're discarding cards and you're assigning these cards to the allies, and you're going to deal damage and remove threats to the minions there and the side schemes there based on the thwart and attack. It's a little clunky. It's very little reward, honestly, for how much impact I have to put in there. Once you do defeat the mission, you get like an on-call Avengers Mansion, which is really nice, and then some sort of upgrade. Maybe you're going to be able to grab an off-aspect support or upgrade. You get a cool new ally, but it's so many resources that you have to commit over there. It feels like it really punishes any deck that does not run a ton of allies. I found myself running like Dum Dum Dugan and Venom just to play over in the mission area, and so that for whatever reason, that's just not what I enjoyed. It makes a lot of the scenarios go much longer. I've played through the campaign a good number of times now, and I've tried multiple different strategies of working with the missions. I've blitzed them at the start of the game. I've completely ignored them, except for that last scenario. You do have to defeat the mission scenario to win the campaign in Apocalypse 2. And then what I have found, the best way is to just build up as much as you possibly can. You basically win the scenario, and then you just prolong your win by dealing with the mission. So you're gonna get the villain down to, maybe it's even stage 2 at like 1 health, and just whittle down on that scenario. And then because you've already taken care of all the threats, you've gained that tempo against the villain, you've defeated the villain effectively in every single way except for reducing their hit points to 0, and then you're dealing with the mission. I didn't love it. It's probably not something that I'm going to revisit too much after, well, actually now, right? I did the video. That being said, we got amazing villains and modular sets, and I don't normally even run the campaigns, so it really doesn't even sway my opinion of the box that much. But if you are someone who enjoys campaigns, this may be a detriment for you. But I love the villains. Honestly, this probably is in contention with the best box for villains out there. It is so freaking good. We have amazing modular sets. So don't take the missions and my sadness and my despair about the missions too hard, because we got some awesome content in this box. Speaking of awesome content, let's talk about some of the heroes. This is going to be a nice 5,000 foot overview of each one of the heroes, because I'm going to be doing individual review videos for each one of the heroes coming to the channel soon. But first, let's chat about Magik. Magik is freaking awesome. I love Lord of the Rings. She feels like Gandalf, the hero in Lord of the Rings. You get to play with the top deck of your card, or the top card of your deck face up, and then so you know what that is. A lot of her upgrades or a lot of her cards deal with the printed resource on that card, and then once per phase, you can play the top card of that deck, reducing its cost by 1. So this can be huge. Getting a Nick Fury in for 3 cost without ditching him from your hand nets you plus 3 cards, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of the shenanigans that you can pull off here. You're able to manipulate the top card of your deck with cards like Limbo and Stepping Disc to help set up that perfect combo. She has one of the best signature allies in the entire game with Colossus, and it's so freaking satisfying to draw into him and then use Limbo at the start of the villain phase to swap him to the top card of your deck, trigger his response to play him, take an attack. You don't even have to exhaust to defend with the attack. Knock off that tough, and then you have a ready Colossus, a 2/2 ally going into the hero phase. It's a freaking exciting play to have. It's so nice. Not only that, she is also a Mystic X-Men character, so we get to brush off all those OP tools that we have when we were playing Strange and Warlock and Scarlet Witch with Sorceress Supreme and Spiritual Meditation. Like, there's just so much to love here with Magik. I've enjoyed her in every single aspect I've played, but leadership, her ally Flood build is incredibly powerful. She did not quite usurp Domino as my favorite, but as I play her more and more, I'm seeing new interactions, which is making that statement harder and harder to say. I'm a huge fan of Magik. I've really enjoyed my plays with her. Let's talk about Bishop. So now, while I do enjoy Magik more than Bishop was a bigger surprise to me. I was very happy when I realized that he's way more fun to play than I was thinking he would be. His hook is all about dealing with resource cards. So like his hero ability, whenever you take damage from a villain, or actually just an enemy attack, you discard cards equal to the amount of damage you took, and you get to add all of those resources that you discarded to your hand. This means that he can then trigger like his uniform to heal based off the number of resource cards he has in his hand. His rifle can deal damage equal to that number. And then when you trigger cards like energy conversion, you get to shuffle all of your resource cards in your discard pile back into your deck. It's pretty easy to have like 5+ in your hand in a given round. He has sinks that you can put those resources into. You can add sinks to his deck. We got a lot of basic sinks, which is pretty great. And a lot of his cards have an extra benefit if you use a resource card to pay for them. So I love how we're just getting more heroes that force us to deck build outside the normal conventions. And so like that video where Villain and I talked about not wanting to have too many resources in a deck, throw that video out the window. Well, I'm guessing you probably could still have too many resources, but it's kind of fun to just flood the deck with resource. And I'm using resource cards like Preservation, which I normally never touch, to really good effect in this deck. And so breathing new life into older cards is one of the reasons why I love this game, and it forces us to find interactions with cards that we haven't picked up in a long time. Honestly, I'm really enjoying Bishop, and he's significantly more powerful than I was expecting. He can really throw down if he wants to. He is strong. Overall, similar to Next Evolution, this is actually a bit easier than what I was expecting when I saw the spoilers. That being said, it isn't an easy box. When I saw the spoilers, I thought it was going to be like a Galaxy's Most Wanted level of hard, and it's not. I think I would put it on par with like a Mad Titan Shadow in terms of difficulty for villains and scenarios or campaigns, but I'm really happy we're not getting another GMW campaign. I feel like we got such a great diversity in villain design, and the heroes are so interesting and unique. All the mod sets in this box are awesome. They're going to see rotation in my normal just plays. When I'm breaking out Claw, or when I'm breaking out Zola, we're gonna see some of these minions. Like I want to see Hounds with Zola. Like that seems like a really fun interaction. All in all, this is a top tier box. As the design team continues to grow and make more of this game, you can tell that they're learning from their past designs and making their new designs with those lessons in mind, but also somehow making them feel fresh and unique. We're getting scenarios that require you to understand and know that scenario and playing that scenario in not just the deck. And what I mean by that is you're approaching the 4 Horsemen. You kind of have to understand how the 4 Horsemen works and tech against the scenario rather than just bringing a deck and playing that deck against every single scenario in the game. And I think that's a good thing. I like the fact that we are getting some scenarios that require us to kind of build for the scenario. We see that in Lord of the Rings a lot, and that's one of the things I love about Lord of the Rings. And so the more scenarios that we get where we are kind of thinking and building for the scenario, I think that's a good thing. And now I don't think it's fair of me to necessarily say this because I buy every single box, but this box is a buy for me. I would 100% buy this box. And if you're looking to expand your Champions collection, this is the good box to buy. Now it's going to up that difficulty a little bit more so than like a Rise of Red Skull or a Sinister Motives. But if you like the theme, if you want to see the heroes in action, this is a good box to grab. So make sure you follow the channel for the full reviews of the heroes coming soon. And I appreciate you all. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you around.